Welcome back to Never Enough Novels. Since we're in the middle of a brutal cold snap here in Pennsylvania, I thought it would be the perfect time to share a roundup of cozy, wintry book recommendations. I don't really have an exact definition for what falls onto this list, but I rounded up a bunch of books that either take place during the winter or are set in frigid locations. These books are great to curl up with a blanket and maybe a warm beverage and enjoy being nice and toasty while you're reading about frigid locations. I have a variety of different genres on this list. So there's a couple fantasy or magical realism books, a few like romance or general fiction ones, and then I'm wrapping it up with a bunch of thrillers that are set during the winter. I'll put the Amazon links to all of these books down below so you can grab any if you see ones that you're interested in and help support this channel at no extra cost to you. Also, if you like these book recommendations, hit subscribe so that you'll see more in the future. Let's kick this list off with some of my fantasy and magical realism books. First up is The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden. This novel reads like a classic Russian fairy tale, and I was absolutely swept away into this harsh landscape. Vazia is a girl who lives in northern Russia, and she has the ability to communicate with the spirits that inhabit her land. Her unique connection with the wilderness just absolutely baffles her family, and different family members or different times in her life, they try to punish her for it, or just let her be, or even protect her from them. When a priest and a new stepmother for Vazia come to stay, they turn their little community away from their traditional offerings to these spirits, and it causes them to start to weaken. A threat that was previously only spoken of in fairy tales starts to take form, and now Vazia and a few members of her community and these spirits are doing whatever they can to protect the village from this new threat. This book is reminiscent of like a long ago fairy tale, but it's written with modern language and pacing, making it very easy to pick up. The characters in the novel are well developed, and the scene setting is just breathtaking. There's also this underlying judgment on religious zeal or superstitions or trying desperately to fit in that definitely applies to modern times as well. This book is also the first one in a trilogy, and it's one of these rare cases where every single book in that trilogy lived up to my expectations. The story just keeps getting better as we follow Vazia and her interaction with these different spirits throughout her life. Next up is The Witch Collector by Carissa Weeks. And if you want a mildly spicy, wintry fantasy novel, this romantasy type book is definitely going to be for you. It's an enthralling tale about a vengeful witch who is forced to work with her enemy to try and save her sister. The Witch Collector comes to Reyna's village once a year during the harvest to select a new person who will be taken as a sacrifice to the Frost King. But this year is going to be different. Reyna has plans to slay both the Witch Collector and the king who took her sister years ago. However, her plans are foiled when another external threat attacks first, and now Reyna has only the Witch Collector left to help save not only her village and her sister, but also possibly their entire kingdom. This book has all of the enemies to lovers tension that we know and love, plus a lot of it takes place in this like harsh, wintry setting as Reyna and Alexis journey to try and save their king. I also love that Reyna is a non-speaking person and communicates with different types of sign language throughout the book. She is beautifully represented and still strong and brave and fearless. It was a delight to watch her thaw towards Alexis as he started to prove over and over again that he might not just be the monster that she originally thought he was. If you want a little bit of a lighter fantasy, I have The Snow Child by Eowyn Ivy, which falls more in the magical realism kind of fairy tale realm. This story focuses on a childless couple who are living in Alaska, and their entire lives are changed when a young girl shows up on their doorstep. She seems to come from the snow itself and flits in and out of their lives throughout that first winter. As they grow closer to her and start to come to think of her as their actual daughter, they try and uncover more of her secrets and why she cannot stand a prolonged time with heat. Over the course of like a decade, Faina kind of keeps growing up and reappears to this couple each winter. They are obviously grateful and joyful for this blessing of the daughter they never thought they would have, but also definitely still question the reality of the situation right along with the reader. This novel has like an ethereal quality that is unlike anything else that I've read. While it has this kind of delightful magical element, it also showcases like the very real struggles of trying to survive in the Alaskan wilderness and also the struggles of hoping that you would have a child and not being able to. It's one of my absolute favorite wintry type reads, and I recommend it to any type of reader. Moving on to a few romances / general fiction books, I have The Lodge by Kayla Olson. This will be great if you still want that kind of cozy, wintry vibe but are tired of reading about holiday romances, it seems like it's kind of hard to find a romance set during the winter that isn't also during the holidays, so this would be a great option for you. This book features a ghostwriter who takes on a new assignment writing a memoir for this member of a former boy band. When she's offered up her client's penthouse at a ski resort in Vermont, she takes him up on the offer and figures she'll get to enjoy the amenities and also take this chance to focus on writing this memoir. While she's up there, she's sorting through the voice memos and emails and things from her client to try and write her book, but also spend some time with the ski instructor who is quite handsome. So there is a bit of romance in this, but also a little bit of a mystery because she's also starting to uncover more about what happened that started to break this boy band up, because there was a member of the band who went missing all these years ago and no one knows what happened to him. And now she's starting to do more with this ghostwriting assignment. She's also starting to uncover more about this mystery. I love that mix of romance but also a little bit of mystery, and I think this would make a great wintry read. Next up is another romance option called 8 Perfect Hours by Leah Louise. This is a little bit more of a traditional romance book, and I love that it kicks off with a chance encounter during a winter storm, but then the rest of the book takes place over the course of a year. Noelle gets stranded on a highway during this massive blizzard and ends up spending hours and hours with a complete stranger while they try to warm up and wait for help. Sam and Noelle sense a connection between the two of them, but they chalk it up to this kind of once-in-a-lifetime experience and assume that they'll never see each other again. However, over the course of the next year, they just happen to pop in and out of each other's lives in the most unlikely of ways, over and over again. As this keeps happening, they start to wonder if all of these coincidences are actually something more and could lead to a lifelong romance. This was such a fun, fateful story. I really liked seeing how Noelle and Sam kept meeting accidentally and was totally rooting for them to get together. It would be a great option for anyone who wants that kind of cozy, wintry start, but then really enjoys stories that play out over a period of time. Heading more into just general fiction, I have The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna. Obviously, this is an incredibly popular author, but I feel like this is one of those books that's sort of fallen off the radar since she's had such blockbuster hits more recently. But this one has stayed with me ever since I first read it. It's still my favorite of hers due to its atmospheric setting, unpredictable characters, and this intense connection I had with them. In the 1970s, a war veteran takes his daughter and his wife into the remote Alaskan wilderness to try to start a new life away from civilization. Cora will follow her husband anywhere, so she and Lenny learn how to survive through learning to live off the land and through the kindness of the local community. However, Ernst is definitely still struggling with some issues from the war, and he becomes more and more violent and unpredictable, leaving Cora and Lenny to make some unimaginably tough decisions. This plot is just completely captivating, focusing on two women who are fighting against this harsh land and trying to survive, while also fighting against this man that they both love but who is clearly not good for them. Another all-time favorite from an incredibly popular author is called Beartown by Frederick Bachman. This story takes place in the town of Beartown, and it features a small community of really tough folk who live deep in the forest. These people live incredibly tough lives, and hockey is their only escape. When their amateur hockey team makes it to the national semifinal, the town believes that this is their chance for the town's survival. A win could mean a renewed interest in town, better sponsors, more money, better players, and an all-around uplifting effect on the entire community. But a scandal involving one of the players and another girl at school happens just before the game, and now everyone in town is kind of forced to take sides and choose who they believe. This novel focuses on the hockey team and some of the players, but it isn't really about hockey at all, and you do not have to enjoy the sport to enjoy this novel. This novel is about people and realistic situations in our everyday lives. It's about strains on a marriage, the relationship between a father and daughter when a crisis affects them, how a small town and everyone's opinions can affect the world around them, and whether people choose to believe a boy or a girl, especially when one is a star athlete. There are so many complex characters in this novel, and each one gets equal attention, which I absolutely love. Bachman does an incredible job showing what flawed humans do when they get a little too caught up in their devotion to a sport or to the community. He also understands courage and standing up for what's right, and he showcases how some characters might have made bad decisions, but ultimately gives them a chance at redemption. This book is just absolutely incredible overall, and the snowy kind of hockey setting puts it on this list, but it's one of those books that I think everyone should read. Next, let's get into a few snowy thrillers. First up is The Crash by Frida McFadden, and this is her newest release in 2025. Tegan is our main character, and she is 8 months pregnant and ready for a fresh start in life when she sets off on a road trip to stay at her brother's house for a while. But along the way, an unexpected blizzard and a broken down car leave her stranded and scared on the highway, until a couple appear out of nowhere and offer her shelter in their cabin nearby. It starts to feel like a miracle for her and just what she needs, until she starts to get the feeling that this couple might not ever let her leave. I am riveted by these type of situations where everything is not quite as it seems, but the character is like physically stuck somewhere and can't get out. So she has to try and figure out what's really going on and whether her life is at stake. This sounds like a thriller that you will just absolutely fly through. Next up is No Exit by Taylor Adams. And I read this a few years ago and still remember like the heart-pounding feeling of reading this entire book. If you want an edge of your seat thriller in life or death situations throughout the entire novel, this book is for you. In kind of a similar situation, our college student Darby gets stuck in a blizzard and she's forced to wait it out at this remote rest stop. Inside are just some vending machines, a coffee maker, and 4 other strangers who are also waiting out the storm. She's desperate to make a call to her mother to check in. She heads outside to try and find a cell signal. And while she's out there, she notices that the van next to her car has a horrifying discovery in the back. As she clears off the windows, she notices there's movement inside and discovers that it is a little girl who is locked in a crate inside of the van. So this new revelation means that she is now stuck inside this rest stop with a kidnapper. The situation becomes increasingly dangerous as Darby realizes that someone inside of that rest stop has been lying, but she has no idea which one, and she must try to escape with her life and the life of this child. This was both a thrilling novel about survival as well as kind of a mystery, since both us and Darby are trying to figure out at the same time who is actually responsible. I also heard that it's being turned into a movie on Hulu, which I cannot wait to watch. The last book I have to share today is kind of a 2-for-1 special because I always love putting The Shining on these type of book lists because this is one of my all-time favorites and it is like the perfect cozy thriller novel. If you've seen the movie, I promise the book is so much better. It is still got that kind of creepy vibes, but it's also a really interesting tale about like the relationship between a father and his son. I'm a huge Stephen King fan, and this is one of my all-time favorite books by him, so I cannot help but recommend this one. However, the actual book that I want to talk about more today is called The Last Room on the Left by Leah Conan, and this is a new book that just came out in January of 2025, and it's got the Shining vibes, but a female perspective. The main character is Carrie, who is facing down a looming deadline on her manuscript, as well as dealing with a drinking problem and a husband who has just left her. So she takes a job as a caretaker of a remote resort during the winter to try to get her life back on track. But after a rough first few hours where she doesn't exactly do what she was meant to, she sees a dead body outside in the snow. And now she doesn't know if this is real or just a trick of her mind, or whether this was an accident or if the killer is still around somewhere. I like that the story is told in alternating timelines between Carrie and the previous caretaker who was there, so what happens sort of slowly unfolds throughout this entire novel. She's definitely a bit of an unreliable narrator as well, since we know about her problems and she doesn't quite trust herself or what she's seeing, but at the same time is faced with this situation that could be life or death. I promise this isn't too scary though. There's a few like red herring scares where you think things are going to happen, but they don't actually turn out to be as horrifying as you would expect. So it's one that you can still read at night, which is always kind of my barometer. So it's not too scary. Definitely it was interesting though, just trying to figure out like what actually happened to these women and what type of situation Carrie found herself in. Hopefully you found a few new books to enjoy this winter. Let me know in the comments if you have any other great books set during the winter or in kind of snowy settings that you want to recommend as well. And stay tuned for more book recommendations.